how can projects monitor and evaluate changes in self-esteem of unemployed youth that are beneficiaries of these projects? He said, I believe positive changes in youth self-esteem can have far-reaching effects on their future employment prospects, but it is difficult to monitor and evaluate these changes. So maybe I will just give the floor to Sylvia. If you can tell us a little bit, Sylvia, how we can measure outcomes that are not strictly labor market outcomes, but other types of outcomes that are very correlated and influence those employment and earnings outcomes.
Yes, so thank you for the great question. This is actually a very, very good point, something I've heard debating for many years. I don't think, unfortunately, there's a straight answer because it's one of those indicators that it's very cultural and context specific. So many indexes have been created in the US, for example, there are some big surveys that can help you monitor personality traits like self-esteem, but they're not easily adaptable to other contexts. So I would say that depending on the type of project, if it's a huge, big-scale project that has a lot of resources, what one can do is try to get researchers to adapt and test those personality traits indexes from usually developed countries to developing countries. Otherwise, if projects are smaller, what I think makes a lot of sense is to use qualitative instruments and do focus groups and key informant interviews to have the youth themselves express the concepts of and kind of operationalize an indicator to measure self-esteem, and then use the same method across time to see if their attitudes and their towards and their description of their sense of self-esteem changes over time. And this relates to what I was actually discussing before, presenting before in our evaluation in Uganda, to the fact that, as you said, the self-esteem and personality traits have definitely a very important impact. Or actually, we're going to test this, but it seems to be a diffused opinion that self-esteem for youth is very important to get employment.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. So now we will jump to a question from Diana Rutherford. And maybe Drew, you can take this one. What is the percentage of the impact evaluation what percentage of the impact evaluations are done by an implementing agency versus an external partner like a researcher or survey firm?
Maybe do you want to? I could, Susanna, but you want to start out?
Okay, so Diana, this is a good question. In general, what we have seen and what we are trying to develop is a very strong monitoring skills and ability of project implementing agencies to monitor and evaluate their programs, and they can do this fully by themselves. But when we talked about impact evaluations that have that require a stronger or heavier set of skills, then we recommend the implementing agency to outsource that to a research firm or someone else with the expertise to design an impact evaluation. It's very important that these two pieces work together, because an impact evaluation should be tailored to the program and not the other way around. So it's really a teamwork, but the core design and probably the implementation itself of the evaluation of an impact evaluation that has these rigorous features that Drew described, it probably is better if they are carried out strictly by externals. So if there is no other question on this,
Maybe I can just follow up as well, Susanna, to Diana. very few is the answer to that are implemented by the organizations themselves. That's why we shifted a bit what our approach is, because we were finding at the start of our work that our main, I guess, beneficiaries to the work, to Jens' work on evaluations were academic institutions and research firms, because they are doing a lot of the work on impact evaluation. This is extremely valuable, and it creates a very rigorous evidence base for which to analyze and draw some generalizations on what's working and what's not in youth employment. But really the organizations themselves are the ones which need to benefit from M&E services, because this is going to improve what they're doing on the ground and the work with beneficiaries. That's why we've shifted our work a little bit to concentrate really on the implementing organizations, which normally don't have the skills or really the interest, to be honest, to do very experimental designs of impact evaluations, but clearly need still to be evaluating what their impact is. So there's a lot of less rigorous forms of M&E that can be used and which are still very beneficial, but are not necessarily using control groups. So I think this is something that we struggle balancing between the very rigorous and really the practical approaches to M&E, and something, yeah, hopefully in the future with feedback continually coming from our network, we'll get better at doing. Sorry to cut you off there, Sarah.
No problem. So we have, and this is just in interest of time, we are a bit over 2 o'clock here in Geneva. So I will take one more question that is coming from Robert Mawanda from Uganda. So Robert's question is about really the next step for impact evaluations, which is really to disseminate those results to policymakers and other people that are designing or programs, youth employment programs. So his question is whether we have been able to disseminate the results of the evaluations that have been completed to policy and decision makers within these countries that you mentioned, Drew, or the ones you pointed out in the map. And if yes, what has been the response, especially from governments, and have they taken any actions? So Robert, I took this question because I think it's very important, because this is the end goal for everyone doing these exercises, besides just the research interest and more on the theoretical side of it. The evaluations Drew showed in the screen are most of them ongoing. Only the one in Tanzania is about to finish, and then it hasn't been, the final results have not been disseminated yet. But what we can take out of this map, and if you look at other regions, what has happened is that when you create this mass of evidence base, it's much easier for policymakers and practitioners to understand and take over the lessons learned. So let me just give you an example in other regions where this exercise has been more advanced, like Latin America, where there are numbers, maybe 10 evaluations already of different programs, and the pool of these results influence some years later or probably simultaneously policy decisions. So we are yet to achieve that step of bringing these results to policymakers, but in a sense, even if you don't look at this map, the youth employment inventory is actually right there for policymakers to understand what's going on, and this is a window for them to gather evidence and further benefit to design programs based on models that seem to be working. I don't know if my colleagues, either Drew or Sylvia, want to jump on this one.
Yeah, I think that's a question that all people working in this area are dealing with, because there's so much information about youth employment programs and what's working out there, that how do you really sort through information and find out really what the knowledge is and what's been proven. So I think we try to be very selective in the knowledge that we're sharing, that it's really a proven base of knowledge.
Yeah, but I think in general, not us, but the whole field probably needs to be investing a little bit more in dissemination that we have been so far. I think that's a problem with also rigorous evaluations, is that we invest so much money and time and effort in producing that evidence, and then there's always not enough time, money, and availability of the researchers to go around and disseminate it. So I think yes, I personally think there should be more should be done on this, but I think that there is now a better trend, and I think Yanin particularly puts a lot of effort in this area.
Okay, so there is one additional question from Rachel Blum about soft skills and basically the design of the impact evaluation of the entrepreneurship curriculum in Uganda. So the question is basically what methods we're using to measure soft skills. Sylvia, if you can quickly elaborate on that, and then we just close the webinar, so try to keep a little bit on time.
Well, my answer will be very short, because I think, again, what we're trying to do now is we have a specialist in the team that is going to try to design the surveys and test them in the local setting. So we're using a survey-based data collection methods.
So with this, I guess there are a couple of questions that are still outstanding, and that we can continue addressing during the next webinars on monitoring and evaluation. So thank you so much everyone for joining. This was, we had about 20 people attending, and it 25 actually. So it's sort of an amazing turnout. Thank you so much. In the next, you are of course invited to our next webinar, which will be taking place on June 6th. And we will be discussing or presenting actually a recent publication on monitoring and evaluation that is called the Measuring Success of Youth Livelihood Interventions, a Practical Guide to Monitoring and Evaluation. So we will have Kevin Hempel from the World Bank introducing us to this guide, and he will touch again on the differences between monitoring and evaluation, and particularly the specifics on impact evaluation, and he will walk us a little bit through the methods on how to identify the right counterfactual and implement an impact evaluation. So I hope this will catch your attention. After that webinar from June 6th, we will have another one on June 27, where we will explore a little bit more on the web and mobile technology for data collection and for project management, monitoring analysis, and other sort of soft tools to help practitioners manage and monitor their projects. Please keep in touch. If you have questions, you can send us via email questions or comments on this webinar. And thanks again to everyone, and especially to Yelena, who was behind the curtains organizing the webinar. Thanks. So, bye-bye.